this is where you are. So you're at the Open Education Tricks and Treats, more than just textbooks, part of our Sask Polytech celebration of Open Education Week. So if this isn't where you intended to be, no shame in leaving now, but you might want to just stay because I think it's going to be really fun. Because I think there's going to be lots of treats looking at who's talking today and the kind of tricks that are really great tricks, as in ideas that you can put to use in your teaching and learning. I'm Myra Zubat-Mitchell. I'm one of the learning technology trainers at Saskatchewan Polytechnic, and I'm going to be hosting today. And our chat monitor is Donna Thiessen. She's also one of the organizers of Open Education Week at Sask Polytech. So thank you, Donna, for all your background work that you've done to get us to this moment, and thanks for what you're doing for this session today. So welcome, and Anitsikwai, Edlanite, Hakoda, Hakona, Hakola, Tawa, Tanshi. So welcome, everybody. I really want to have us start in a good way today, and part of that for me is to acknowledge the land that we're on, the beauty of this land, and also acknowledge the peoples of the land, the people for whom this land has been sacred for time immemorial. So I'll acknowledge that we at Sask Polytech, where this webinar is originating from, learn, work, live, and benefit from being on the lands of the Nayawak, the Anishinaabeg, the Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and the homelands of the Métis Mischief Nations. These are also known as the territories of Treaty 4 and Treaty 6. And I'm joining you today from Oskana Usastike. And my pronunciation is really poor, but I am trying. Or the place where the bones are piled. It's also known as Regina. And I'm going to say this as much for a reminder for myself as anything, is that a land acknowledgement for me is more than just acknowledging or bowing to the idea of the land, but it's also that reminder of how I personally have benefited and continue to benefit from the sharing of this land. And it's also a statement of my commitment to learning hard truths and being committed to reconciliation and justice. And I think these ideas are so important for us as we move into looking at open education and open pedagogy. And on this slide, you can see I've got a picture of a web, and that's in acknowledgement, a spider web, that's an acknowledgement of how we all are connected. And so I'd like you to, in the spirit of that and in the spirit of open education and connection, I'd like to invite you to acknowledge each other and to share greetings in the chat today. So if you want to just, say hello to the other people who are here, and especially to identify where you're joining us from, your land location, the institution, and if you're from Sask Polytech, if you can also let us know your division or program. So just put those into the chat, please. We've got people from south of here and people from north of here. And I know for sure west, and I'm seeing east now too. And I would like to mention that this session's being recorded, and it will be posted to our YouTube channel with an open license. And this recording will be one that you're able to use and to share. And we will email this address to you when it's available. So we're welcoming attendance from Sask Polytechnic and the international community, as you can see in the greetings that we're getting. And also, finally, if you could stay muted during the presentations, that would really be helpful, because there's quite a large group of us here, and you can add questions to the chat and they'll be addressed at the end of the presentation, unless it's something that needs to be addressed in a more timely fashion in order for us to move forward in good ways. So Donna will be keeping an eye on that chat. Our format today is that we're doing something called lightning talk. So each of our presenters is going to have 5 to 7 minutes to talk. And I know that I've talked with Terry and Ellen about this already, and haven't had a chance to mention it to you, Chris, yet. But at 5 minutes, when the time is up, I'm going to put up the Zoom timer, and that will show in the corner of my screen and also up at the top of yours. So it'll be a circle on the picture of me and just a little box on yours, just to give you an idea of when you've got just 2 minutes left to go. And we will have a time for questions at the end of all the speakers. So our first lightning, I can't help but think it's, they're catalysts for lightening our speakers here today. So our first catalyst is Alan Levine, who's the Director of Innovation and Community Engagement for Open Education Global. After putting a web server on the Maricopa Community Colleges Network in 1993, which I'll say as a side, that's about the time that I started in distance learning as well, and the whole internet online development. So anyway, so since then, in 1993, Alan Levine has not left the web since, and his current role is Director of Community and Innovation for Open Education Global, and is an independent consultant. Before that, he worked with organizations such as BC Campus, eCampus Ontario, Coventry University, the University of Guadalajara, Creative Commons, the Virginia Commonwealth University, the Universidad del Sagrado Corazon, the Open University, and Mozilla. Earlier, Alan led innovation efforts with the New Media Consortium and Maricopa Community Colleges. Working from home in Saskatchewan now, Alan's interests include digital storytelling, photography, bending WordPress to his whims, and it says in the material I got, ask him about, I don't know if you say splots or SPLOTs, but and randomly dipping into and sharing from the infinite river of the internet. So take it away, Alan.
All right. Thank you, Myra, and thank you, Donna. I also am a bit little irreverent, so excuse me. Thank you so much. It's great to be here. It's kind of ironic. I work for this international organization. We run Open Education Week that's going on that our colleagues at Sask Polytech are running so well. And so usually, like when I'm in my events, it's like being from Saskatchewan is pretty exotic because they're from all over the places. So, but it's great to be here with local people. And I'm going to talk really fast. I'm probably going to say things that might just blow past you. I am interruptible, but I get very excited about this H5P technology. I know that it may be new to people, but the thing that I really like so much about it is that it epitomizes everything that we want in terms of openness. So I'm not doing any slides. I'm going to use some H5P itself to do some sharing. And that link that I put in the chat is going to be where all my materials are that I'm showing you. And I generally show you more than I can actually talk about in any time. So this is sitting on a website, and I'm going to run this little thing, which is, I'm going to actually just back out a second because there's a really important thing about H5P. It's basically a self-contained little bit of web stuff. And because it's the kind of web stuff that is kind of native to the web, it can run anywhere. So it can run in Pressbooks, it can run in Moodle. It's running here off of a WordPress site. H5P is almost like a JPEG image, like you can use it wherever you go. There's something very, very particular about things with H5P is you always see these little buttons in the bottom corner. So there's a reuse button. So you can actually, wherever you see that reuse button, you can actually download this thing. And if you have tools, and I could talk about this, you can actually open this and you can use it, you can change it, you can laugh at it, you can see the insides of it. So H5P is reusable. And then also, because of the way H5P tracks information, all the media that I have used in this presentation, it has all its attributes, including, Creative Commons licensing. So I'm practicing good attribution behavior. I'm going to show you a thing. This is like H5P is a whole series of 54 different kinds of things that you can use in your learning materials on the web, etc. And so this is a brand new one that I came across and I wanted to learn it. So I said, I'm going to learn how to use this one called Game Map. This is one of the more complex H5P tools. So the things of that we are most familiar with, H5P does. So it does multiple choice. It does true, false. It does fill in the blank. It does them kind of elegantly in a way that you can give really good feedback. So there's lots of different ways. I'm going to talk generally about interactivity. Often people want to use it to do things to like test their students. They want to do assessment. Sometimes they want to do just to do self-learning checks to provide something that students can go through and sort of test their knowledge of understanding as they're working it. I could do scored assessments. So H5P, I did like a non-standard multiple choice thing. Everything is right. The score doesn't here really count. So I've achieved this thing. This game map is kind of interesting. It looks like a thing from video games, but what it allows me to do is create a structured sequence through a bunch of different interactive types. So I'm going to go on to the next little thing. So H5P has all these little tools. And when you go to the site, it might be a little bit mesmerizing. There's so many, like, where do I start? What do I do? And often you'll find, you'll see a site, your instructional help site will list all the tools and tell you what they do. And some will be obvious and some will won't. But frankly, I think sometimes, and I use this metaphor a lot about cooking, is like when I want to cook a meal, I don't just grab a fancy appliance off the shelf or just grab random things. So the thing about that I think is important when you're new to H5P is before you start going in, it's fine to go in and mess with the tools. That's fine in my book. But you may want to just look at existing content. And to me, that's the most important thing, is to see what other instructors have done with H5P. So this is from a whole website. I'm actually using, this is an H5P type called Hotspot, so I can have links. So eCampus has an H5P studio. Terry has tons of stuff in there that's very valuable to look at. It's all H5P content that you can get inspired by, and you can actually, most of it you can download and reuse. So there are different kinds of studios out there of H5P content you can find. There is this thing called the H5P periodic table, and it's kind of interesting. So you have all these tools and it helps you pick them by their complexity, etc. The interesting thing is it's done in H5P. And then since we have Pressbooks here, the Pressbooks directory, actually you can do searches to find titles within there that have H5P. So if you're teaching biology, you can look at all the biology titles and find the ones with H5P. And this little pop-up shows you how to do it, but I don't have much time here to go through all this. So I'm going on to the next stage in my progress. So if you come through this at a later time, this will open up a link to one of my websites within this H5P kitchen site that I have that has other different kind of approaches to looking at all these tools, because it's still a little bit dizzying when you look at it. So anyhow, here's my little quiz, true or false. There's 54 H5P content types listed on the main site or when you go into H5P authoring. Are those the ones you can only use? Maybe. True. Wrong. No. No, maybe not. I guess it's false. So, in fact, what's kind of interesting is that I already did that one. What's kind of interesting as I go on to the next one, is a way that you can actually use even more that you can find in the official sort of collections. And so I'm going to show you very quickly this one called Interactive. And I think this one is really neat. So there's a developer in Germany. His name is Oliver Tacky. He has coded and created most of those 54 content types. He does these other ones that are outside of the box of the ones that you can get, but you can actually still use it in a site through a nifty way. So this is one called you create priorities. And so this is where you want students to be able to take things and put them on a list here and sort of say what's most important. And so I think this is really interesting. There's often activities we want students to do to rank things in order. What I like about this one is you can actually put a little explanation for your reason. You can add one if one wasn't on there. You can give a summary. And this one, you can actually save your work as a Word document. So this is pretty neat. And if you come back here and look at my instructions, this tells you how you use something and add it to H5P if it's not necessarily in there. So this is where I'm like going so fast that your head is spinning, probably. But I'm going to keep on going because I can only see my clock and not Donna. So the thing with H5P, out of those 54 tools, and look, I'm going very quickly. There's like most of them are single activities. They do one thing. And so there are ones that also just do content. So if you come back here, this is called drag and drop. So it's one where you want students to sort of fill things and drop it in. I'm not going to go through this right now because I see my time is going. I didn't plan it so well, and I just did that one. And let's see, I got to check it to go on to the next stage. Oh, I'm really, Terry, look how bad I'm doing here with my demo. There's other ways to look at the tools. And this is one by a great educator named Peg French in Ontario. It's the ones that on one spectrum has more info and on the other spectrum takes more time to create. All very helpful. There are ways to be creative outside the tool. So I have here 4 examples of things that I never thought would be useful. So there's a thing called a personality quiz, where you ask questions and then it sort of tells you, well, this is what kind of actor you would be. And I always looked at it and said, I have no use for that. But I found on the H5P, the eCampus Ontario student, someone from University of Windsor in the School of Environmental Science, they used it to create a guide to help students walk through the decision-making to pick a resource in environmental science. This is incredibly inventive. And I have about 4 more examples there of ways that I've seen instructors create content that sort of go beyond just what the tool provides. So that is my extremely ridiculously fast sharing of what I can see. I wanted to try out this H5P content type. When you come back here, I've got a whole bunch of other things. This is another H5P content type called the accordion. I've got some links and examples and a few other. If you ever want to see like someone try to present using a branching scenario, which is a fantastic tool in H5P for doing simulations and case studies, you can do right there. So I know I'm probably going way over time. I didn't even see, I heard you beat Myra.
Yeah, that's okay. And Terry was saying it's worth it. We'll let him keep going. He can use some of my time. I knew you were aware of the time, so it's good. So thank you. I am excited about that, and I almost want to leave and start looking at examples right now. But we will go on to our next presentation, which is going to be a video presentation. These 2 presenters weren't able to be here today, but they've created a short video for us of talking about what they have done with open education. And the 2 presenters are Nina Verishagen and Diane Zerr, who both work at Sask Polytech. Nina is a faculty librarian at Sask Polytech and also serves as the library's communication and marketing service coordinator. Since 2020, she's focused on the development of educational tools to enhance critical thinking and lifelong learning skills. Her work provides foundational knowledge in online information disorder, highlighting disinformation as a major issue. In partnership with Diane Zerr, a learning services instructor at Sask Polytech, Nina has developed 2 open education resources, a course and a book, both under the title Disinformation Dealing with a Disaster.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our lightning talk today. My name is Nina Verishagen. I am coming to you from Treaty 6 territory in Saskatoon. And I'm joined by my colleague Diane Zerr, who is coming from Treaty 4 territory in Regina. We are both employees at Saskatchewan Polytechnic, and we are creators of an open course that is about the topic of disinformation and critical evaluation of information, which we will be presenting to you today. So what did we create? Over the last 3 years, we have developed 2 open education resources, an open course, which is 3 hours long, asynchronous and self-paced, and exists in multiple formats, and also an open textbook, which is 5 chapters long and is in Pressbooks. So the course is our focus today. And as I said, there are multiple versions. We have an internal version, which is built in Brightspace, which is our institution's learning management system. That one is called Info 100, Critical Evaluation of Information. And there are various versions, including a staff PD version, a student self-register, and there are duplicates for specific classes. We also have a truly open version, which exists in Thinkific. And that one is called Disinformation Dealing with the Disaster. It only has one version, and you can scan the QR code right there if you are interested in enrolling in it yourself.
Right, and since we're talking about the course today, this is an overview of the course content. It is the same in both platforms, Thinkific and Brightspace. We try to include a lot of interactive elements to increase active learning for students. On the right here is an example of one of our quizzes, and this quiz is auto-graded. In addition to that interactive element, we also have discussion posts and videos that students can participate in. We included a lot of UDL design elements. For those who might not know, UDL stands for Universal Design for Learning. Some of the features in this course you can see on the right-hand side are multiple representations. So in this case, we have options for both audio and print. And below on the bottom of the slide, you can see some important concepts that we pulled out so that students know what is coming in the module. There are a few other items listed on this slide as well that tell you a little bit more about the other UDL elements that we included. One of the nice things about our course is that once students complete it, they get a certificate of completion and they can use this to show their learning. Some students use this in their portfolios and others submit it to their instructors. Next, we'd like to talk about how the course is being used. We've had a lot of faculty interest in the course, and so we have a PD version of it created where there are currently 106 staff members enrolled. We have had a lot of student interest in it. Currently, we have 3 courses in 3 different programs that do end up requiring the course. You can see those listed below. Overall, some of those students are included in this number, but there's a lot of students that have self-registered, and overall there are 595 student enrollments that have happened over the past 2 years. One of the things that led to that high level of enrollment was a contest we ran. 119 students participated in the contest, and all we offered was a prize. So it was probably the content of the course that created the interest and helped students complete it.
So now we're going to move on to the tips and tricks session, where we are going to share our learning as the developers of 2 open education resources. So our first tip is, if it's available, apply for funding. We knew that the project that we were looking at was a big one, big enough that we wouldn't be able to just complete it as a part of our regular jobs. So we applied for funding to work extra days, and we were fortunate to receive it, and this helped us a lot. Another really important piece is make sure if you're creating something that you actually want people to use, seek the input of those people. So in order to create it effectively, we held a few focus groups, and we asked instructors questions like, will you actually make your students do this course if we create it? How long would you like it to be? What format should it be in? Really important foundational questions like that. And it provided us with a lot of knowledge and information that was helpful. Creating an OER is managing a project, and that is a very, very important tip to remember. If you have a creative brain and you have a wonderful idea for a textbook or a course, remember that perhaps you are the subject matter expert, and you maybe need to seek out other experts, and you maybe should run it like a project with timelines and deliverables and a schedule. We found this to be extremely helpful with our second project. We did not think of this in our first one, so we learned our lesson. And I am stealing this from another colleague at Sask Polytech who says, think about how much time it'll take you and add more. She specifically says add 2 months. I'm just saying add more here. So it does take time to create these things. make sure that you promote it. We do not think, as was evidenced in our contest earlier, we did not think that people would just want to take the course for no reason. We understood that we needed to promote it, and as is evidenced in Diane talking earlier about our contest, it does work. So we have found that hosting internal PD sessions, attending conferences like this, things like just emailing our colleagues and letting them know, and word of mouth marketing has been really, really helpful in making sure that our course continues to be used. Make sure that you have a plan at the outset to sustain your project, or your OER rather. Once you have a completed OER, you can't just walk away from it. In addition to promoting it, you do need to make sure that you're sustaining it. As you can imagine, a topic like disinformation is a moving target. And so we minimally once a year need to review our content, make updates, and think about changes that might happen. We also have 2 faculty librarians who monitor discussion posts to make sure that, we know what's going on actually in the course. But we did, at the outset, created it to be self-sustaining, and we are very proud that it is. It's very little work for librarians or instructors to have their students take it. There's self-register, complete the content, and you're done. It's something that we love, and it's something that our users of the course love as well.
All right, so if you want to access our materials, you can view our course on Brightspace if you're within Sask Polytech, or Thinkific, and the link and the QR code are there for Thinkific. If you'd like to read our textbook, it is available on Pressbooks. The link and the QR code are there.
So I am looking forward to our next presenter as well. Terry Greene is enthusiastic about open, networked, and connected online learning, and brings this to his work as a senior learning designer for Trent Online. He holds a B.Ed in elementary education from the University of Alberta, and a master's in science and instructional design and technology from the University of North Dakota. He's interested in both the cutting and the trailing edges of technology in education, especially those uses that increase the human element in technology-enabled learning. And hint, hint, as he says, these are probably the more open ones. He's also hosted an amazing series of podcasts called Gettin' Air about education, with a major focus on open education since 2018. So welcome, Terry, and take it away.
Hi, thank you so much for the great welcome. I appreciate it. I just want to say that the video was so smooth. You could have just played it and I would have thought they were here. That was smooth. Nice. I would have been fooled, absolutely. Am I allowed to share screen? I'm guessing because Alan was, so.
Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna go to this one. You seeing that? I just have this one slide and then I'm gonna go to a couple other. Thumbs up if you're seeing it. Awesome. All right, so I'm Terry Greene. I'm the senior e-learning designer in Trent Online, which is part of the Center for Teaching and Learning at Trent University. It's on the land of the Michi-Saagiig Anishinaabe. I live and work there and raise my family, so I'm endlessly grateful for that opportunity. And Peterborough is also known as Nogo Jiwanong in the Indigenous parlance. And okay, so I'm here to talk about podcasting. And I don't know if you noticed in the chat, I love Alan Levine very much, and I owe most of this to him. So I owe him all my 5 to 7 minutes and then more. So great pick having Alan here too, and everybody. So anyway, I'm blathering and wasting all my time. So I often use podcasting in my work of creating online courses, using audio content to enhance and complement online learning experiences. And I also run my own, as you see on the slide, that little snowboardy guy with a microphone is the logo for my podcast, which is called Gettin' Air, the Open Pedagogy Podcast. So the idea there is to connect with someone like anybody here as a guest. It's an interview style podcast to get some airtime for those who work in open and technology enabled learning, and to share their work, share their pedagogy, and just get to know them, and so that I get to know them, and whoever my tens and tens of listeners get to know them as well. And it's a great opportunity for me to connect with people as well as others. So it's also fun because a number of times I've helped others get their own podcasts up and running, and then they end up having a better podcast than mine. So I think that's pretty cool. It's been about since, you said 2018. I think the first episode was maybe recorded in 2017. So I was thinking it started in 2017. There's 170 episodes now. 171 coming later this week with Jeff Gallant from Open Education Georgia. I can't remember the exact title of the organization, but it's much like an eCampus Ontario, BC Campus kind of thing. And he's doing fantastic work down in Georgia with getting access to open educational resources. So that'll come out for Open Education Week. If you look at my, I'm done the first bullet point there as an update. I should speed up. Experience. No, I'm not. Yep, I'm done the first one. Sorry. So anyway, I think podcasting is really highly suitable for educational purposes because if you do it right, it's very accessible, it's flexible, it gives you the ability to engage with learners through another style. It kind of enacts, it's one way to enact a bit of UDL, which was mentioned in your course building. I think its strength is as a complementary piece to the course, the text of the course, videos of the course, the readings. It's a great way to enable a community of inquiry, I think, to add a bit of like if there's a class podcast or something, there's a chance for students to connect with each other with the content and with the instructor maybe. So I think it's endlessly helpful as a piece of the puzzle to make great engaging online learning experiences. And one example, we used a podcast to kind of deconstruct the online course. The meat and potatoes sometimes is the mini lecture video. We've deconstructed it into slides and podcast with an interview style that we hope is, and we're hearing from the students that is very engaging for them. So that's one way to use them. For platforms, it's a real mixed bag of what you might use to create podcasts. So I think I should just tell you what I use, and you go ahead and find your way too. But so I actually do the recording, the meeting online. We don't meet in person if I'm doing an interview podcast using a tool called Zencastr, which is a really great tool that kind of gives you a higher quality of audio than maybe recording in Zoom or something for the audio. And it also, you give separate tracks for everybody, so it's easier to edit and stuff, or at least you can get more fancy with the editing. I use an open source software called Audacity for editing itself. A microphone, the hardware itself, I don't use it now. This is a more expensive mic that I was able to get the funding for, but a Blue Snowball is a great kind of mid-range, not too expensive. Like 150 of those 170 episodes are on a Blue Snowball. So that's a good mid-range one. And for the actual hosting of it, so there's a podcasting network called Voice Ed Radio Canada. And it's really run by one man, Stephen Hurley. And you'd think he's a gatekeeper of it, but it's more like the gate's open, come on in. He's at the gate helping you come in. So if you're ever interested in running a podcast and want some support, this guy is willing and able to do it. But you can also go your own way, use SoundCloud, use YouTube, or use whatever place. It's all about what's comfortable to you. So, and then also once you've created a podcast, the actual sharing of the link that's out there. Twitter is melting, so you might want to use something else. These days, I seem to be in LinkedIn and get traction for sharing my podcast on LinkedIn. So you might try that, or Blue Sky or Mastodon. Just try and see where it gets traction. Put it everywhere if you want. It's up to you. But that's your chance to get the audience to join the conversation a bit, even before and after you record the podcast, actually. If you let people know who you're going to talk to, they'll let you know some things to talk to them about. Tips or tricks. I've got a minute to get through 4 of my 6 bullets. This is going great. Tips or tricks. To me, the tip is this is about getting the chance to talk. Just like having to do an essay is about doing some writing. So just keep talking, talk. Give yourself the chance. Record it all, but you don't have to release anything that you don't want to. So know that, and have your guest know that. You don't have to release anything. Everybody has full veto power to cut things that they don't want put out there, and that lowers the temperature, because people really do. Your guests sometimes get quite nervous about this. They've never done a podcast before and they don't know. So it's all about lowering the temperature and making both of you comfortable, and you'll have a more fun, informal, maybe conversation. This is all tips for an interview style podcast. That's the only tips I can give you. So a little limited there, but it's I think the main tip is to speak with your guest beforehand. Let them know that they have that veto power and that they can be comfortable, and you'll talk about things they know about and want to talk about, and they'll have a great time to chat. Quickly, some of the challenges are the audio editing takes a little while to get used to, but you can do a minimal approach, so don't worry too much about that. And just usually, if you're running your own podcast, it's off the side of your desk, so finding the time to do it and stuff. And also another challenge is helping people become relaxed, as I already mentioned. Jumping into the deep end, my suggestion is to come up with a simple concept, steal my concept, do whatever you want, but do it. Record a pilot. And you don't have to release it if you hate it, but just do it. That's my big jumping into the deep end suggestion. And my training recommendations are, I think this is a good one. Start your podcast, invite other people who podcast like you to your show, and they'll be happy to chat, and you'll get free expert consultation. There's your tip. There's your training. Other than that, Google it, search when you get stuck. That free expert consultation idea, I fall for it every time. It works, so go for it. And that's it. Thank you for the time.
Thanks so much, Terry. That was really helpful, and so many great, very solid ideas there. Ideas that could be put into action. So our next guest is somebody from Sask Polytech, or part-time at Sask Polytech. She does a lot of things. Linda Aksomitis. She's been teaching and developing courses on the web since 2000. The organizations she's worked for include the Girl Guides of Canada, Powered Incorporated, which is a US company that provided non-credit online courses for resellers such as BarnesandNoble.com University. She's worked for the Institute of Children's Literature, doing credit courses through the University of Connecticut. She's worked with Education to Go, a California company providing non-credit online courses delivered by community colleges and libraries around the world. Credenda Virtual College is another place that she's worked with, and of course now Sask Polytech as well. Linda has published more than 30 nonfiction and fiction books for all ages, including the textbook, The Guide to Becoming a Library Technician. And so we have a video presentation that Linda's created, and she's also with us today. So when we get to the question discussion time, you'll be able to interact with Linda.
Hello and welcome to this lightning talk. I'm Linda Aksomitis, your presenter, and the session is Oh Yeah Treats, More Than Just Textbooks. Here are a few things you may not know about me. I've been developing online content since 1997, so I'm a dinosaur in internet time. I taught in early MOOCs, massive open online courses developed through Powered Inc. and delivered by Barnes & Noble University, as well as other courses. I've been teaching online asynchronous courses offered at 4,000 plus colleges and libraries worldwide for 20 plus years through Education to Go. I taught synchronous online courses for 8 years in the library technician and business programs at Credenda Virtual College out of Prince Albert. I've been at Saskatchewan Polytechnic for 9 years as an instructional designer and online curriculum developer. I'd like to share some of the tips I have in creating zero textbook cost, or ZTC, online courses. So let's take a look. This is a course I'm currently developing only using OER resources. Now, you're probably already very familiar with embedding YouTube videos, which are of course one form of open resource, or licensed resource rather. This is a basic page of content where I indicate my source right at the top of the page, then add the material, typically reformatting it if it's a long topic into panels, which will break the material up and make them easier for the user in the online environment. I like to find different ways to include the content in a course other than simply putting the text in. So with this particular one, this is an activity where students are to write descriptions of policies and bylaws from either from their own personal experience or from what they've already covered. And so these are simply flip cards. This is another method I use to make the content more visual and still include a lot of the OER resources and information the student needs to learn. So with these ones, you simply select and the quotes from the online textbook are added and displayed for the learner. One thing I found that there are a lot of open source material available in for reuse is from the government. And this particular infographic is on mental disorders in Canada, and it's from the infographic collection from the Government of Canada. And it allows you, with their license, to embed it in your content. And it also gives you a print or a text version, and you can view the infographic in full size or read the text version from its original source. This is another infographic example, and this one is 5 tips for an effective communication strategy for stakeholder engagement. And it's from SustainNet and is released with a Creative Commons 2.0 license. The information, of course, for the reference is always included on each page. And when you're using an infographic, it's always wise to give a text-only version for students using a screen reader. This page of content features an image from Pixabay, which is a free image database. You'll find various on the web, but you do need to check the licensing to make sure that your reuse will be legal, of course, when you're using images from the web. And always ensure that you add the information. This page is from the OER textbook, Human Resources Management. Before I close, I'd like to give you a few tips on how to actually find some of these open source materials, or OER, for your courses. This particular search is the one I prefer, so I do often use the different directories. We have one here from the library, as well as various other ones from online schools. However, I find Google is a really good way to find specific topics, because I typically use 20 to 30 different OER resources or different online textbooks in any given course. So this one, what I do is I indicate precisely what I would like to include in my content and then add the term Pressbooks to it. So here I have searched and I have a variety of different resources that have come up, and I'll give you a quick look at some of them. As you've seen, I use images, videos, infographics. You can also find free PowerPoints for reuse, embeddable review questions, discussion questions as part of OER content and open source textbooks, case studies, and examples. Plus, there's so many more things that I've found useful. I hope you do too. So thanks for spending time with me in today's session. Have fun with OER.
Well, thank you, Linda, for that. And we're going to move on now to Chris Hillary, who is going to be talking with us about simulation. And I understand, Chris, that you were busy working with simulations just before you came in here, so that's awesome. Chris is a registered nurse with a Bachelor of Science in Nursing and a Master of Health Science Education. In his past life, Chris was a critical care transport nurse in Canada's Arctic territories, serving remote and Indigenous communities. Currently, Chris is an instructor in Selkirk College's Bachelor of Science in Nursing program. In his educational endeavors, Chris has had the opportunity to contribute to the Selkirk College Teaching and Learning Center through instructional releases. During these releases, Chris has functioned in the role of support for their learning management system. He's worked on OER virtual simulation development and most recently as a micro-credential educational developer. Chris says that he's constantly fascinated by the process of learning. Through these various unfortunate career opportunities, he's discovered a passion for democratizing education through open pedagogical practices and open resources, simulation-based experiential learning, team-based learning, and the thoughtful integration of educational technologies. Underlying it all is a belief in the importance of intentional educational design and of fostering learning agency to support rich, meaningful learning. Looking forward to hearing about simulation from you, Chris.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here, and I do just want to acknowledge that I am coming to you from Castlegar, British Columbia. Selkirk College has several campuses throughout the West Kootenay region, and they kind of overlap several unceded traditional territories, including the Suniix, the Syilx, the Ktunaxa, and the Secwepemc peoples. So I just want to express my gratitude for being in this space and coming to you virtually today. Just going to set up my screen a little bit here. So yes, so I'm coming to you to speak about simulation and specifically a specific modality of simulation. Simulation has its roots in experiential learning, and just for a quick show of hands as I'm talking, I'm curious how many healthcare educators we have on the call today. Because I'm going to be basing this really from that perspective of healthcare education. So simulation is rooted in experiential learning. We get a lot of our processes and practices from aviation, which is where simulation really originated. And typically simulation, when we think of simulation in healthcare, we think of working with a plastic mannequin that responds to interventions and things like that, or working with an actor who is meant to represent a client interaction. For obvious reasons, in 2020, a lot of our simulation practices had to, I'm going to use the word pivot, and we had to become a little more innovative. And at that point, we started looking to what one modality of simulation that we refer to either as virtual simulation or screen-based simulation that has its roots in gamification. And it's been really interesting seeing Alan and Linda speak about some of those resources, particularly H5P, because that is one platform that we have used in developing these simulations. So as I speak, I'm going to just share my screen to give a bit of a representation of what this could look like. Yep, share sound. So there are many different platforms that are available to use for this. I'm representing one particular platform called Affinity, which I really do quite like. As well, we've also used a Pressbooks version that integrates H5P, specifically the branching video scenario tool. My experience with the development of this resources really started in my participation and facilitation in SIM that then branched into this specific modality. In terms of developing these resources, I've been involved from conception to production, storyboarding and scripting. I've done a little bit of very light media editing, and then developing of the material using different software platforms to kind of create the finished product. As I said, I've been involved for about 4 years, starting in 2020 for obvious reasons. What I like about this particular technology is that when we talk about simulation in general, simulation offers learners a chance to experience situations in low-risk environments, low or no-risk environments, but are often person or resource intensive to run multiple times. So specific scenarios are often a one-time event for a learner. Virtual simulations or screen-based simulations take that a step further in that they're truly risk-free for the most part for patients and clients. And they give learners a chance to revisit the simulation on their own terms and explore the learning through making mistakes, sometimes intentionally, to explore different branches of a scenario. Virtual simulations allow for multiple modes of facilitation. What I would say is that when we talk about simulation, facilitation really is key. But virtual simulations allow us to facilitate that scenario in large group, small group, and individual settings. And we can deliver that both synchronously and asynchronously. So there's some flexibility in the delivery of that. Virtual simulations are evidence-informed. There's quite a growing body of literature to support its efficacy. And what we're finding is that now that most folks are, for the most part, back into the in-person setting, we aren't necessarily reliant on these quite as much, but they have retained their use in terms of augmenting learning or as supplementary learning activities that help us bridge the gap between theory and practice. So what these look like is often there are a video lead-in that sets up a stage, and then learners are presented with an interaction. And what you're seeing right here is an H5P representation of this. And based on the choice, it then takes them to the next step. The affinity learning, which I quite like, offers different representations of the same kind of interactions. There's a little more flexibility in some of the additional features that they can access. And what we're seeing here is a presentation of some clinical data and then more of an exploratory process where they select.
Okay, Holly, I'm going to take a look at your reflexes now.
Features of the image, and it allows them to then proceed through the simulation further from there. In terms of being openly accessed for this medium, this is where we get into a little bit of a challenge. So open access in this case means that it is readily available for educators to access and deliver to their learners. We do still fall back on simulation facilitation best practices and guidelines, and that does call for specialty training to support learner safety in these simulations with appropriate pre-brief and debrief. And what we find is sometimes because it is virtual and there is that flexibility, it can lend itself sometimes to being inappropriately kind of set and forget approach. And what we find is that we lose some of the value, and in some cases we can even damage the learner experience with that. So my caution there is that yes, there is flexibility in the delivery, but it should still be facilitated by the instructor. Some platforms do require a learner account, which can be a barrier for some participants due to privacy. Being often video hefty, this does require adequate hardware and internet bandwidth for the learners to access appropriately, and we have run into those problems even when we're facilitating here on campus. And then the other piece to it is that development is intensive. In one of the previous presentations, someone did say that it is project management, and I would say that this is very much a project management process. Adaptation becomes tricky, so while it may be openly accessible, while you may grant rights for adaptation and revision, because it is video-based, that adaptation is tricky, so especially where video is involved. So updates are likely not realistic, and what that means is that often some of the scenarios may have a shelf life. In terms of different platforms, I've alluded to a couple. H5P really is a great tool. Their branching scenario tool is one application of that. Other ones that are a little more cost intensive, such as Rise 360, if people are familiar with that. We use Moodle as our LMS here, and a Moodle lesson can actually be realistically set up to construct these scenarios. And then, as I've said, I've advocated for a platform called Affinity Learning, but there's a whole host of other software platforms that range from either free versions to subscription-based. Couple of tricks. Recruit help, involve your colleagues, your clients and patients, involve your students as co-creators. Media designers, get a media designer on board, and as well as a learning designer. One interesting point that I had as a anecdote is that one of the students that you just saw involved in that last clip was participating in an exchange to Uganda, and she related that her participation in building this scenario, she was able to use some of the clinical learning from that to help recognize a preeclampsia case while she was in Uganda. So that was quite cool. Spend time developing your characters. So even if those elements don't come out in the scenario, treat them like they're real people so that the fidelity or realism comes out and it seems more authentic. Spend time on the storyboarding. So the details really matter because it's hard to go back and fix them later after you have filmed. Review, get others to review, make sure that things flow, that the details are correct. Challenges, I think the biggest one is cost. To do too well, this requires equipment and expertise in videography or animation. In terms of jumping into the deep end, I would actually recommend starting out in the wading pool. Go slow, make sure you collaborate, find funding, get some training on storyboarding, scripting, how to build those interaction points into appropriate points in the storyline. And then again, run it like it's a project. It takes time, it takes money, and give yourself lots of leeway to develop a quality project. Finally, in terms of training, Simulation Canada offers some massive open online course on how to facilitate virtual simulations, which I highly recommend. And then actually, I believe it is eCampus Ontario has what's called the Virtual Simulation and Educators Toolkit. And I can provide a link for that as well. And that's what I have in closing. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. Wow, we have quite this has I want to say a whirlwind lightning tour here, and I just wanted to, as you're starting to think about your questions, the people that have been here in the audience today, I want to just talk about a few things that have really stood out for me. One is just how many resources that there are, and to think that can be overwhelming in and of itself. And so I really appreciate all of you talking a little bit about this is what I use and this is how I find the resources that I use. And also really noted that a number of you pointed out the importance of asking for help. I think that that's actually something that underlies open education in many ways, that building of a community and knowing that we can't do these things alone. And so ask for the help that you need, and whether that's reaching out for somebody who's done a podcast, or it's reaching out to people in your institution for help. And also being realistic about what kind of skills, what time, what kind of resources do I need in the funding. So I appreciate both the inspiration and the realism. I feel like we've taken the electricity, the lightning electricity, and maybe put it into a bit of a cable with the caution so that we can make it more useful. So I'm wondering if there are any questions that have appeared in the chat. And I think it's also okay if Dawn, is it okay if people unmute themselves at this point in time as well with questions?
No, I think any questions that appeared there, people have been answering, and I'm thinking everyone is completely enthralled with the presentations. We covered a lot of ground, my goodness. But if anyone has any questions, you're welcome to bring them up. I'm also going to, just because of time, I'm going to throw up a poll about this session, just so we can get some feedback on it as well. I think we can carry on with the conversation, but I'm also going to suggest that maybe you would take a look at the poll as well.
And while people are thinking of their questions, I'll just throw a question out there. Chris mentioned getting students involved with helping, and Terry also, I was thinking about students when you were talking, because I know that there's some instructors here at Sask Polytech who are actually giving podcasting as an option, part of the Universal Design for Learning Different Means of Representation. They're saying you can create a podcast to students. So do any of you actually, I'm thinking Chris and Terry in particular, but others might have some advice as well for working with students or actually having students build some of these kinds of things?
I can go,
ahead, Terry.
Chris.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Yeah, this reminded me of something I should have included. In the midst of the pandemic, eCampus Ontario funded a bunch of virtual learning strategy things, and we built a resource called the Liberated Learner, which is for helping learners be more independent online learners. And there is a section on podcasting. So there's the technology section. Has podcasting, video production, and graphic design, and just general technological fluency. And it's, I think, endlessly valuable for instructors to give to students when they want to offer those these options. So, and they can, it'll walk students through the production process.
All right. Now, is that you put a link to that in the chat there? Is
That's
that
right to the
there?
chapter itself, but also
okay, awesome. Thank you. Chris, was there something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think one of the benefits of being from a smaller institution is, and I'm in no way casting aspersions, but I really do feel like I have the opportunity to really get to know some of my learners, and engage with them and learn what they're interested in. And I find I've been able to really develop a relationship with folks who express an interest and a passion in this. We also leverage it to some extent in terms of we have certain leadership projects throughout the BSN program where students engage with a community partner and then work on projects that have a research base, but also in a deliverable. So that was one way that we've engaged our learners in being involved, where we had a group of students that we collaborated with College of the Rockies as well, where they did some research around issues concerning SOGI and LGBTQ issues. And from there developed a scenario and a script that supported learners through working with a non-binary post-operative client. And then if all else fails, bribe them. The most recent project that I was working on was funded by Colleges and Institutes of Canada, and I did have a production budget where I was able to offer some financial support to students who wanted to be involved. But that I did find that payment piece was the initial hurdle, and once people were sort of sucked in, they were engaged and they wanted to help produce something of value. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm wondering if there's any of the other, I think Linda might be our only other speaker that's left here. Alan had to leave early, but I don't know if Linda, you had anything you wanted to add on that, or if somebody else has a question. And by the way, those of you who are our speakers, if you have a question that you're dying to ask somebody who's another person who was on the panel, feel free to ask a question as well. Linda, did you have something you wanted to add? I noticed you've got your video up here.
Yeah, not really. I mean, I shortened mine down quite a bit. So definitely I use OER resources in a variety of ways and instructional, because I have done teaching as well as just straight development, but kind of, if anyone has questions, I'd be happy to share, shall I say.
I know that in the absence of another question, I have another question as well, because I noticed that Linda, you shared some ways that you find open resources, and Chris and Terry, you both did talk a bit about resources, but I'm wondering if any of you have favorite open resources or favorite platforms that you didn't get a chance to talk about, that you think, oh yeah, this would be something as somebody's exploring integrating open pedagogy and open resources would be a really good place to look for inspiration or to help you build.
Okay, I find that, let me think which ones have it, that several of the post-secondary institutions have really good catalogs of all of their materials. So UBC certainly does. Let me think which other ones there are. I prefer to stick to the Canadian ones now because a lot of them have edited for Canadian content, so that instead of getting American examples or American, laws, you are getting Canadian. So there are a lot now that are available in Canada, which is good. The press books in particular.
Thanks. And Terry, you've unmuted yourself there, I see.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, my like holy triumvirate of open-ish tools that I love to use in making online learning experiences is Pressbooks, H5P, and Hypothesis, which is a social annotation tool. All together, you can make some really, and you saw from Alan, like H5P is the heavyweight, endlessly helpful, but Pressbooks maybe as a platform for open sharing of resources, and just the act of social annotation that Hypothesis does is a whole new way of making the readings more central and social and connective tissue of the course. Very valuable. It's not the only way to annotate together, but Hypothesis is a favorite for sure.
Okay, thank you. Chris?
Yeah. Interesting you mentioned Hypothesis, Terry. That's something I've played around with, and I quite like it. I haven't had the chance to implement it in my teaching just yet, but I would love to. The challenge with the virtual simulations is because they're kind of they're almost a product that you can't really manipulate, like an open source textbook where you have maybe a Creative Commons license to revise and adapt. Video is really hard to adapt because you're essentially trying to recreate different scenes. But in terms of availability, I do support, so the Affinity platform that I've showed you, Toronto Metro University has what they call their virtual simulation experience, which has sort of a series of interactive scenarios. And then CanSim, which is a obviously Canadian organization, they have a repository of virtual simulation scenarios. And then again, I can only echo the use of Pressbooks, which we're seeing more and more of. BC Campus here in British Columbia would be the analog to eCampus Ontario, I believe. And they host that, and they have a repository of a range of open educational resources, of which virtual simulations are. So, yeah.
So I see that we've got some great, in the spirit of openness, some really great sharing from people who have been attending as well. So thank you for that, and to the presenters for putting information, the links in there as well. I'm going to be silent for about 30 seconds here just to see if there's anybody who has just been waiting for a moment to unmute. Yeah, Jeopardy music. Do, 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 do.
Well, while we're waiting, I'm just going to say thanks to our presenters. I know Myra's going to do this as well. I didn't quite know how this was going to go. We kind of threw, I think it was sort of like 5 very different ingredients into a bowl to see what came out. And what came out was amazing. We have a fabulous cake. Maybe analogy would be good if we went back to Alan's kitchen. So thank you so much for each of you. This was a challenging task to sort of take your passion and your educational area and condense it down into a very short period. But I think the result's amazing. So thanks so much.
Yes, many thanks. And Donna, would you mind bringing up the slide 13 there just for the people from Sask Polytech before they leave here today? This is in particular for those of us at Sask Polytech, that your hosts, that know that as you're venturing into open education, that you can always ask for help. These are not the only resources that we have, but we thought, Donna and I were talking about this, these are good gateway resources. So if you ask, say that I want to do a particular thing, ask any one of these, some people from any one of these areas, and we can point you in the right direction, even if we're not the right people for exactly what you're asking for. So please, again, ask for what you need, and thank you so much for being here, both the presenters and those of you who have been actively participating and you're listening, and I've seen bowed heads and note-taking, and so it's just been great to have everybody together here today. If the presenters could just stay on for a couple minutes after other people leave, we'd like to do a little debrief. And just a reminder, I know Donna has posted this in the chat as well, but this is only the first of 5 sessions, so every day this week and then next Monday as well. We're going to be having some really interesting sessions, everything from Indigenous knowledge and open education to artificial intelligence, and addressing the question of, does OE really benefit learners and in how? So look forward to seeing some of you, or maybe all of you, at the other sessions.